Welcome back to the second stage recap of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. As you can tell, I'm still in Paris holding a hairdryer. Hope that doesn't bother you too much. Benji's made his way over to the UK overnight. Don't know how much sleep he had on the bus, but no rest for the wicked. Tour de France Femmes was a light warm up yesterday. 80k. Today was a cracking stage, much more action packed from Meaux to Provins, 136.4 kilometers, and it looks flat. But in this area of the world, there's crosswinds, which they eventuated today. We got a lot of crosswind flirtation in the Tour de France male race that never eventuated. Well, we had it today, and it was the finish line, 600 meters. 4.5%, with some parts a little bit steeper. Just again, we discussed ad nauseum, Benji and myself. Is it Balsamo? Is it Vos? Is it too hard for weavers? We might never find out. But before we get into the action, we'll mention our show partners, Zwift, who are the title sponsor of this race and the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. And whether you're just starting out on your cycling journey or are looking for those final tune-ups ahead of a big event or race, Zwift is the online cycling platform that makes things fun and can make that training entertaining. There are 9 different worlds, thousands of kilometers of virtual road, including replicas of real-world climbs like Alpe du Zwift and Ventop, training plans and events and races for every level of rider. If you want to check it out, you can go to Zwift.com for a free 7-day trial, or if you want to just find out more about the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, you can go to the website Zwift.com as well. But crosswinds were mooted, Benji, and I think the big first news of the day was crashes. Just a really nervous peloton.
It's crazy. Like, we knew that echelons can create tension and nervousness and so forth, and we saw certain parts of the race where it was more dense when it comes to the forest and so forth. So the surroundings were better for no echelons to happen, and that's where the peloton's less dense. But the second they come towards a section that is a bit more open, you see riders fighting to get into a position that matters, and it's noticeable that once you look from the helicopter shot, I was looking at like 20 near misses when it comes to crashes. Like, they weren't crashing, but they just missed the crash. And when that is happening from a helicopter shot, you know that it's a matter of time before proper crashes started happening. And I think eventually we had like one section where echelons happened, where Yara Kostelein was behind for a bit, but everything kind of came back together. Then a crash or some kind of like accident or incident happened between Yara Kostelein and a teammate of her and another rider, where Yara Kostelein was once again behind, had to chase again. So plenty of chasing early on for those riders, but it really came down to the bigger crashes that followed afterwards. And one of the bigger victims was one of the big GC riders in this race. And we see a situation where in the group, there's a crash in the middle of the pack, and we see Marta Cavalli able to stop and not crash, but then we see a shot from behind where Nicole Frayne, Australian rider, she ends up like, it's like she's riding through riders that are standing still because of the crash and doesn't necessarily brake, and she just rides straight into Cavalli. And obviously it can be that there was a mechanical failure, like that her brakes weren't working, but I'd be surprised in that situation. I found it really weird and a bit of a dangerous move to ride through standstill riders like that at pretty high speed, and it straight up cost Cavalli everything here, because she rides straight into Cavalli. Cavalli is like 3 minutes behind at a certain point because of that, and we actually heard a bit later that she's out of the race, which is gigantic because she was a second favorite for this Tour de France Femmes for me.
Yeah, we thought she'd definitely be on the podium of this race in GC, and like the Giro Donna, she was really good. She was crazy in the Ardennes, and it's really a big shame to see her out. And yeah, she's out of the race, abandoned. She looked visibly shaken up. But the big news of the day was apparently it was planned. A team attack by Trek Segafredo at the intermediate sprint before the echelons really kicked in. And so we see Kopecky, she's going for green, going for getting the lead out from SD Works. We see SD Works investing, Chantal van der Broek Black. Like they had runners at the front pacing for that intermediate sprint.
But I feel like that was one of the worst leadouts I've seen in a while, and it was because Majerus, the second rider in the train, just wasn't good enough to keep up with Van den Broek Black, and then she fell through that, and Kopecky had to try and close someone. Fortunately for Kopecky, someone else closed Van den Broek Black and basically became the second rider in her lead out. Like, it was a bit messy, but they got there eventually, in my opinion.
And then we think, okay, intermediate sprint gone. And you know how sometimes we've seen, like in the past, Sagan joking, like, let's keep it going after an intermediate sprint. We've got a gap. Well, the Trek Segafredo women's team was like, how about we actually just use the intermediate sprint to launch a full-scale team attack afterwards? And that's what happened with Balsamo going, with Elisa Longoborghini, Persico, who we mentioned in the preview, sort of puncher sprinter type for Valcar. She looks very good. She gets in the move. Van der Duyn's up the road. She had a 40-second gap that was reduced like 25 after the intermediate sprint because of SD Works pacing. And so Elisa Longoborghini gets in there too, and a group's formed. Suddenly we're into Crosswinds, and there's like 6 groups on the road. There's Ludwig, who's trying to come back. She's caught in a group behind. Cavalli's even further back. I can't see any of SD Works. Patino is pacing, I think, the Movistar rider, who's maybe the key domestique for Annemiek van Vleuten. On the front, DSM will help later with Liana Lippert. They're going for the stage win and protect the yellow jersey of Lorena Wiebes. SD Works are the big losers here. This move, like we said in the preview, no one's beating Annemiek van Vleuten one-on-one. Maybe Cavalli could have, but unfortunately she's out. No one is beating her one-on-one without crashes or whatever. It's these sort of moves on the stages where teams matter in the flat, where ABV in echelons and crosswinds, she can't just bridge a 30-second gap to these riders pulling at the front. But SD Works missed it, Benji. They didn't get Vollering in the move. They didn't get anyone in the move, or even Kopecky in the move. But they also weren't pulling hard behind. Maybe they didn't, like Majerus was off the back. It kind of feels like they got mugged, to be honest.
Yeah, basically, and we saw that Molman and Vollering were still in that group with Wibbes, which is not the group ahead, which is the group behind, and they don't have domestiques to do anything. And we saw a bit of a desperate move by Vollering there. And, like, I don't know what to expect from SD Works in that situation, because when the gap goes out to 20 seconds, 25 seconds, 30 seconds with Lippert pacing for DSM, like, we mentioned those riders pacing in that group of Wibbes now, like, and Vollering then decides to go for a solo move of, like, it didn't last longer than 30 seconds and she got caught again. That's not going to help the cooperation in that group. And the same thing with DSM, kind of, because Lippert was doing loads of work, but Pfeiffer Georgie took over and she paced that hard that she basically dropped Lippert off the wheel and had a duo attack with a Movistar rider that was also pacing for a bit and then waited on the group again. Like, all these parts help the front group getting away more and more. And then you see that second group again, and it's just like Jumbo's trying to move up and trying to mingle to make sure that they can stop the tempo, kind of, and Canyon Schramm doing the same for Nivea Doma, who's up front. So they were blocking the pace in that second group, and honestly, the second that Balsamo group went away with Vos and Silvolva, I was like, this ain't coming back.
Particularly because it wasn't just Longoborghini pulling. Balsamo was pulling a lot. And this is what we also see with 6 riders in a team rather than 8. We see Juliette Lebeau having to pull. And it's a really difficult balance where if you have mixed GC goals and sprint goals, the GC rider has to pull sometimes in the wind too. There's no hiding for Lebeau on DSM. She was pulling, and I think at least she didn't lose too much time because of it. But yeah, the curious part of this finish is Balsamo's pulling, and from my look with another rider in the group, a lot. Like, normally in this situation, you would expect the quote-unquote sprinter or finisher to lessen their workload. Elisa Longoborghini, more of the diesel, she will take longer pulls to compensate for Balsamo sitting on a bit more. And in the crosswinds, you could tell how strong Vos is. She was just like binning. Persico and Van der Duyn couldn't pull in the crosswinds. They were just skipping the rotation. Vos was actually binning people in the crosswind section. And Balsamo was strong too. But yeah, and at that point I was like, I think they're going for Elisa Longoborghini GC. And I know it's going to sound like hindsight, but I think that's fine. I would have approached it in a different way. I think if you're going for a longer Bulgari GC plus letting her have a chance at the stage, I think trying to have her attack at the base of the final 600-meter climb is never going to work. It's never, ever going to work. You need to try and let the wheel go. When Van der Duyn and Persico were letting gaps open, so Vos has to look at Niewiadoma. She probably wouldn't. Vos would just close it, but it's further out. So that was my problem with the plan, Benji. Were you surprised? Because, listen, you called Balsamo for this finish. World champion. She has more of a prospect of winning this stage, going into the yellow jersey, going for points. She got a lot of points taken from her today. That's a higher probability, from my perspective, than Elisa Longoborghini winning this race on GC.
While I agree, I think during the stage, stuff might have changed when it comes to that. Because, for example, we see the race evolving, we see Cavalli crashing, we see Uttara Ludwig behind, we see those situations where the riders that Longoborghini would be fighting against for that podium, for example, are dropping off the back. So I think the more the scenario happens, the more chance he actually gets to get closer and closer to a podium spot and perhaps a third spot on this race if this continues like this. And I would have said Balsamo's better at this finish for the stage win 100%. I still stand by that.
Yeah, that's facts.
But when it comes to her legs, I'm not 100% sure about it. Yesterday
she said something, right?
Yesterday she mentioned after the race that her positioning wasn't all right, or she was boxed in, but her legs also weren't that great. So perhaps that turned over to today and had the same feeling about it. I don't know. We don't know that aspect of Trek Segafredo here, whether that was the decision behind the scenes for Longoborghini to try and do something from afar, try and get the stage win, even though I saw no way by going for Longoborghini that Vos was not winning this race.
Impossible, because Vos will just, she'll be like, she's not stupid. She's like, I know what you're going to try and do. And she'll just shut it down. And that's exactly what happened. Elisa Longoborghini tries an attack after a Balsamo pull, I think, in the last 600 meters. It's immediately shut down. And then we have Persico sitting on Elisa Longoborghini. If she's going for GC, she's now in a very tough spot with Balsamo dropped. She's like, I should just have to keep pulling then. And she kind of keeps pulling, but then she did stop and they're finessing at the end and they're losing time on GC. So I don't really get the play there. Like, when the first attack doesn't work and Vos closes you, the stage is done. So then you got to go to the secondary goal of maximizing GC time, which is why Balsamo sacrificed for you. So you got to pace the whole climb. Don't attack, finesse, pace a bit, then finesse, then give 10 seconds back. So Vos is just sitting, waiting. She knows if Vos begins her sprint at the same time as the other two, Persico and Niewiadoma, the other two real threats, if she begins her sprint at the same time, she cannot lose. And if she's not boxed in. So she did that. She waited, and then she kicked exactly the same time Niewiadoma triggered and put about 10 bike lengths into everybody so she could have a nice post-up celebration photo. And Vos wins, just like I predicted, even though it was not like this whatsoever. I did not think it would be a reduced group. I thought it would be a sprint. And she beats Persico. She looked good. Like, it was still a long way, but she still looks good for Valcar. Still a good result. Second, Niewiadoma third, Longoborghini on a 2-second gap fourth. Van der Duyn got the most competitive rider. She's already having a good Tour de France in fifth. Weber's sixth, leading the group behind with Julie de Wilde seventh, Barbieri eighth, Kopecky ninth, Confalonieri for Ceretis 10th. Following in that group too, Lebu and Van Vleuten lose 5 seconds to that group and 32 seconds to ELB. To be honest, I don't think Van Vleuten has to be concerned at all with the 30-second gap to ELB. But it is a sign of what could happen. Like, if SD Works get in a move further out with a DSM, with Lebu in there, this is probably unlikely to happen, then I'm like, Van Vleuten's going to have to pull herself at some point. That should be the goal of these other teams in this first 4 stages.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that's the scenario that we kind of saw today accidentally. Well, not accidentally, Trek forced it. And we had a scenario where Movistar was forced into chasing. And it depends on the strength of Movistar in these 4 races or the strength of Van Vleuten herself in perhaps tomorrow's stage to hold on Côte de Mutinier. We'll talk about it in a second when we take a look at the profile. Like, attacks will come in those stages, but I do want to mention, low-key, that we messed up one thing in the preview. Apparently, the youth classification is U23 and not U25, so Labouc can't win it. I think
Oh.
Van Androoy is favorite then, if that's the case.
Van Androoy's cleaning it then. Well, she should. I don't know how much time she lost today. But okay, it's different. Van Androoy's already on a minute 7. And yeah, okay. Otherwise, it's a bad day for FDJ all round. Cavalli out, Ludwig losing time, Music crashed. I don't know if that was in the last 3Ks, but she went down. She did get back on her bike pretty quickly. So just a bad day all day round for FDJ. Vos, however, goes into the leader's jersey, 10 seconds ahead of Persico, 12 ahead of Nevidoma, 18 ahead of Longoborghini, and a 35-second gap on the sort of other serious, apart from Persico, serious sprinters, Vivas, Kopecky, Barbieri. Tomorrow's stage from Reims, Epernay. It's a tough one for me. It's another sort of classics style stage, 134 Ks, bit more climbing, and particularly close to the end, we have like Cat 4, 700 meters, 8%, 1.8 kilometers, 6.6%. Then we get closer. The Côte de Mutiny. I know it's mutiny, but I'm going to call it Côte de Mutiny. 1 kilometer, 11.5%. That is maths. 16 kilometers from the finish, and then rolling terrain. Then the Mont Bernard, 700 meters, 7%, and then another punchy finish. I think Vos is winning this stage, but I don't know. I think SD Works got to send that climb, Benji, and just hope something sticks or a split happens. The 11% one.
I think I'm looking at a low-key attack by Grace Brown somewhere. Is that possible?
Yes, I guess it's possible. I think it's, what is it? 10K. It's a 10K valley before the next climb. So going solo, you need a lot of disorganization behind. I think SD Works should try something. Trek showed what's possible today. I don't know about the win situation. I think Vos wins again, though. I think Vos is in such good form. I don't think she's missing a trick. Her team is strong. Like Rihanna Marcus, Anna Henderson, her team is strong. I think Vos is winning again. And it's a shame because Balsamo seems to be, she's almost given up on her legs by the second stage from the way she's ridden today.
Yeah, it's surprising, and it's because we saw so much dominance with her the initial part of the season that when it now matters in the Tour de France Femmes, we expected more in these first 2 stages. And I don't know, I feel like Trek won GC 30 seconds today, but in the grand scheme of things, they disappointed with Balsamo for me, and that's the overwhelming thought when it comes to Trek in this race so far, I'd say. But I said it, Grace Brown, late attack. I think she gets over that climb with the climbers, and then she attacks away from that group, and there's people looking at each other, that kind of scenario. Perhaps she gets up there with Mavi Garcia like that one stage she did. I vaguely remember something like that. Could have been wrong. But anyway, like Grace Brown, I believe.
I think an attack like that, particularly on a Liège light parcours, this is that climb, the Côte de Mutiny is, similar to a kilometer of doing the Murder-Wee. I see it, or a Liège style climb. So yeah, it should be a good stage tomorrow. Hopefully the riders that crashed today, of which there were quite a few, all rest up and recover okay. And thoughts with Marta Cavalli and all others that crashed. It's a shame to see that, but Marianne Vos, the GOAT, just killer instinct, gets the job done, goes into yellow. I think she'll definitely defend yellow tomorrow. And I don't know, Trek and SD Works, they got to go hard tomorrow. They have to. AVV, you cannot go into those final stages. If you want to win GC or do something with without a huge gap on her. But that's all from us today. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you at the recap of Stage 3 tomorrow. Ciao.